and welcome back to Life Unpotted. This is Sophie here. Thanks for joining us for another conversation. Today, I just wanted to start off the conversation by expressing myself about what's on my mind. And I keep noticing how many times in my life where I have an immediate response of fear, worry, concern, anxiety that feels much bigger and much larger than the reality of what's going to actually unfold. And the reason I'm able to understand this now is because I have allowed myself to sit through these feelings as they come up instead of jumping to the conclusions of, oh, that conversation is going to be really hard, or this thing is going to be really difficult, or this is going to happen. These conclusions and assumptions that we make immediately in response to some scenario. And the alternative to that, which is what I have been finding helpful, is just pausing, taking some time to step back, step away, reflect, and come back to it in 30 minutes, an hour, a day. I think for me, it's this urgency and this immediate need to know and to solve a problem, only to realize that it's the perceived problem, the perception that there is a problem that makes things a lot worse. But when I remember that I'm able to handle anything, no matter how things unfold, that no matter how difficult it is, I will always get to the other side. I'm reminded that I don't need to react out of fear, and I can just allow the time to pass and allow myself to wait it out and make the decision of how I feel when it's happening. So, really, a reminder of how anxiety and fear can really get in the way sometimes and make us feel really, really, really convinced that something is going to go a certain way. But in reality, it's just the emotion arising. And sometimes those emotions have nothing to do with what you think they do. So it's just important to pause, take a step back, come back to the moment, let your mind time to process and remember that don't be so quick to make an assumption because we never really know what anything is or how things are going to unfold.
Yeah, I think it's definitely easy when we're faced with something that maybe isn't what we want to jump right to fixating on it and making it worse, as opposed to saying, okay, something has happened, something has risen up in my life that I don't like. Let me first take a minute just to collect myself, making sure that I'm in a state of, okay, I'm balanced, I'm grounded, because I feel as though, like, when we're met with these things in life that are stressful, anxiety inducing, inconvenient, it's so easy to just go in and focus and fixate on what that means about our life, what that experience is going to say about the impact it's going to have on us. So I totally resonate with that. I think it's so easy for us to just spiral straight into the mind when it comes to an inconvenience or something that might bring up anxiety. And it's certainly never as worse in the moment of what we think it is as it actually is, because all of a sudden it becomes like a fixation at the forefront of what it is that we're thinking about. So, of course, we're going to put all of our energy into that. So, that's why I think the importance of when something comes up, just taking a step back, making sure you've eaten, making sure you've moved your body today, making sure you've taken care of basic needs for yourself to make sure that you're in a place where you can, in a grounded place, deal with something that your mind is creating a whole garden of problems with. And I think, especially with the age of social media, cell phone usage, anyone at any time can just pop into our life and drop a bomb or tell us something that, in the past, it would have to be a phone call, or in the past, it would have to be a letter, these different types of boundaries, I guess. But the phone, it's something that we always have on our hip for the most part. And that has its benefits, but it definitely has its drawbacks of we are accessible at all times and we shouldn't be accessible at all times. So it's like really learning to realize, okay, if there's a text from someone or a call from someone or there's an incident, a conflict that's arising, I don't have to reply to it. Just, I think it's been made to think since we have a cell phone, we have to reply to everything. But I think that can be a slippery slope because we always have to check in with ourselves before going into like an intense conflict or an anxiety inducing situation or an emergency, whatever it may be. It's like we always have to like ground and let the thoughts float away before we bring them into like the whole conversation with someone, or let them eat away at us so that we're not actually seeing things clearly. So just because we have access to our phones at all times to talk with people at all times doesn't mean that we should.
Yeah, I think the phone reference is relevant specifically because I just had an experience where I had a friend text me and ask me to talk tomorrow. I'm going to be meeting up with her tomorrow. And she was like, I just wanted to see if we could meet up earlier so we could have a conversation. And I had just got out of therapy and immediately my stomach dropped and I got so scared. I got so anxious. What is she going to want to talk about? Did I do something wrong? I didn't want to, did I upset her? All of a sudden, I'm taking this message and I'm creating a million stories around it of what does this mean? Trying to fill in the gaps of the uncertainty that arises. And it's so interesting because I think that I have struggled with this a lot in my life of I think something's wrong, I need to fix it right away. I can't deal with the let me take a day to sit on this. Let me take some time before I need to frantically need to call the person and make sure, "Is everything okay? Is everything okay?" And I'm questioning this. I'm questioning why. Why do I do that? And I think what I'm concluding now is because there's such a fear that comes up that if someone feels a certain way or if someone's mad at me or if there's a problem, I have to fix it right now. And I think a lot of the times, like in my life, that just I saw this with dating, I saw this with work, I saw this with so many things. And what I'm realizing now, it's just anxiety. Like it's literally just anxiety, and it's anxiety that's masking itself again to seem believable. Oh no, there's a problem. I have to fix it right now. And it's like, take a step back. You're existing on a planet for a short period of time. Most things will be able to get worked through. And again, I think in this context, I'm talking about anything ranging from getting that text message to something more intense on the other end of it. I think reactions to situations, immediate reactions to situations has been something I've been reflecting on and just becoming aware of how quick I am to judge and assume that something's terribly wrong and there's never going to be a way to fix it. And time after time again, I realize as I go through the hard shit and as I face my fears and as I face confrontation and as I face all of these uncomfortable scenarios that once I would have ran away from, when you stop running away and you let time pass and you let the situation unfold, you realize it's not anything more than another experience. It's nothing more than another experience in your life that you're going to have, and life will continue on. Time will pass, you'll forget about it. Or you won't. You'll impact your life to some extent, but all that time in between of worrying and ruminating and trying to fix things is just not necessary. And it just causes a lot of problems. But I think sometimes it can be really easy for our minds to not know this because we assume that what we're experiencing is truth instead of remembering that, whoa, okay, take a step back. The mind lies to us sometimes. It's not always reflecting what's happening in reality. This is where accountability comes in. So, yeah, taking a step back, I think it's always really impactful and helpful.
Well, it's the last thing that you think of when there's something that sends you into fight or flight. The last thing you think of is, oh, I should take space from this because it almost kind of invades your space. It's something that it's going to happen continuously in our life over and over and over again. There's always going to be moments of conflict or anxiety inducing experiences with people. I mean, I think conflict is like such a big one. It's so scary to think, oh, what if I've done something that's just not forgivable? And there's like, well, there's nothing that I've actually done. We have these moments of like when something is piercing through us that's like making us feel very anxious and we're worried about it. It's like, it's going to be not really natural to step away from it. Like, we're going to feel like we want to cling to it. And especially when it comes to things like conflict, um, there's probably like a fear that, we are going to be this bad person, that we've done something so wrong. And I think that's probably what makes relationships and any type of relationship really difficult. Because if someone else is upset, it means I've done something wrong and like I'm a bad person. So, depending on like your experiences, that could mean like you feel shameful, you want to shut down, you feel like you don't deserve love. But I think in these experiences, being able to find space to say, okay, so there's someone else who wants to talk to me about something, and who knows what that's going to be about. But before I do that, I've got to check in with myself and realize that no matter what happens, like I'm going to stand by myself. Like I love myself. I can handle things. I'm going to ground in this. No matter what anyone says to me, it's not going to take away like my self worth or my ability to love or be loved. And I think being able to separate that can really make relationships more smooth because you're showing up not just thinking in a defensive manner of defending your ability to be loved or defending your ability to not feel shame. Like when you can accept that no matter what this person says to me, I have my own self. I have love for my own self and no one can take that away. And so when you appear to a relationship conflict or a friendship conflict or a family conflict, you're not going to be so fixated on defending that because if what they're saying has validity, it means I can't be loved. So if you're able to show up saying, I know that I love myself no matter what, it's going to be way less defensive and it's going to be way more like, okay, let's work through this. I understand. Let's find a resolution. Because a lot of the times, like, we are humans and we are driven by emotions. We inherently just are. We are emotional beings. So a lot of the times it's just we want to express ourselves, but that has a meaning attached to it from our experiences going through this life, being fearful that someone expressing themselves might mean that we've actually done something wrong. Like there's that association maybe. But I think the more we're able to normalize others expressing themselves and are expressing ourselves to come to a common ground, the more we're also going to be able to take accountability for our own emotions. Because to get there, that's what we have to do. And that is a much better route than shutting down and not allowing someone to express themselves because it means something about you.
Yeah, it's interesting how this diverged into, well, the example I referenced was specifically in regard to a situation where a friend was trying to express themselves. And I'd say conflict within interpersonal relationships has been a large or a common place for this kind of needing to panic, needing to freak out has come up. But as I'm thinking about this, it's like going beyond that, what it really is the need to control and the need to know. And I reflect on how many things in my life I have tried to constantly control. Like, it's almost like everything. Like, I think back to when I was interviewing for jobs during law school and how I would obsess and ruminate on the period between having the interview and waiting to hear back. Like, I couldn't handle the gap in the uncertainty and the gap of not knowing of, I had this interview on Friday and I won't hear back till next Friday, so what do I do now? I have to panic and worry and think about this and try to come up with every scenario in my mind to understand, "Oh, I think I said that right, and because I said that right, I think this is gonna work out." And it's like all of a sudden you're creating this, you're trying to piece the pieces of the puzzle together in your mind to try to logically work through the scenario so you can come to some affirmative conclusion and some affirmative knowing of, okay, I know, so I'm good. And what that really is, it's like the fear of not knowing. So it's so interesting to think about, why are we so scared of not knowing? Why are we so scared of letting go of control? Why are we so scared of allowing ourselves to go through that week where we are waiting to find out? And the job example is a good one. And I think there's so many instances in my life where, you know, editing a podcast in the morning and I know I have to take care of it at night, later that night, but I'm so anxious about it until I can start working on it again. Like, not allowing yourself to just move on and enter the new moment of life and not bring it with you is something that's so interesting to me. Like, how many times I fixate instead of just letting go and revisiting it. So what do you think about that, Daisy? Like, have you seen that in your life? This fixation and holding on and needing control and not being able to just surrender to I don't know and I don't have to be so scared of that.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. It's almost like, well, the example you gave with work, like we see it as a problem. So if we're not working on it, we're avoiding a problem. So I'm not going to feel okay until I'm working on it. But I think it can apply to so many situations where any sort of fear arises. And as opposed to just witnessing that fear and being like, oh, okay, so that's something I can think about later. I can talk about with people later. And this could be in relation to work. Instead, it's like we choose to choose that and we choose to believe that. And when we do that, that gets in the way of our ability to perform or to exist, and not be eaten up by the thought we're having. It's like, I think I'm just kind of seeing how it's so easy to want to jump to believe a thought about something to be true. So if it's true in that moment, it's like, okay, I need to just say fuck it and stop trying. Like in this instance, like it could be of like you're trying to create something and you might have a thought of like doubt that comes up of like, right, like I don't want to do that or I shouldn't be doing that. So it's like that means you should totally just stop as opposed to keeping on going and working through the exercise of creating and building and take that thought and to think about it longer term and understand where is this coming from? What does this mean? Does this mean I need to pivot or change something? I think it's having the awareness to almost like, I don't know if compartmentalize is the right word, but it feels like there's a fine line between a doubt or a fear being noticed by you and like kind of penning it for later versus like all of a sudden like that is taking up all of the space in your mind and inhibiting you from actually taking part in what you're doing. So, and again, I think all of that probably is anxiety, but I see how there's such a different type of resolution if you are able to compartmentalize that or notice it and to keep going as opposed to just fixating on that and letting that stop you from doing anything that you want because that's not going to be a resolution that you want if that's what's happening. It's like being able to separate and realize that sometimes it takes time to work through a problem and the problem isn't going to be solved by you just saying, "All right, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to walk away from this." Like a lot of the times problems are something you're aware of for a long time and it's allowing yourself to keep going even when you know there's like a problem.
I also think that if you're somebody who has avoided conflict or has ran away from quote unquote conflict, and it's interesting to think of how conflict is such a scary thing. Like, my mom's always like, I hate conflict. I hate conflict. I can't handle conflict. I can't handle it. It's too stressful. It's too stressful. And it's just so interesting because so much of that, it's like, I'm asking why though? Why? Why are we so scared? And it's like how much we blow things out of proportion to, like, let's just say this conversation with my friend. Let's just say, oh, it is a little bit difficult. Okay. Since when can I not handle difficult experiences? Since when do I not know how to go through a difficult experience? How many difficult experiences have I gone through the past 3 years? I can name plenty of excruciating, painful experiences that were awful, and I saw no way out until I found out that me not thinking there was a way out was what was causing so much of my suffering. You'll always get through it, and I just think that this is how we feel stuck in life. When we hyper fixate, all of our attention starts going to this one thing because guess what? We're scared of it. But if only I can come up with a resolution in my head, then maybe I won't be so scared of it. It's like what we're really trying to do is find a world in which we're not scared and run away from the fear. But what I'm realizing right now is that you don't have to know what the job's going to tell you in that example to relax. You don't have to get to that point where you have the quote unquote resolution because the resolution isn't coming from needing to know. It's coming from recognizing that it's okay to feel a little scared. It's okay to feel a little nervous. It's okay to accept that I don't know and I want to know. Because I think when we face how we're feeling instead of running away from it by saying, oh, I'm so scared. I need to know. What is this person going to say? How's this going to unfold? What am I going to do? Instead of, okay, take a step back. Why is this impacting me so much? And I think that's where it comes down to. I think sometimes we almost want to do anything that we can. We attribute the fear we're experiencing to an external factor and we think it's coming from that person or it's coming from the situation or it's coming from out there, but it's always coming from in here. It's always coming from inside of you. And you can feel okay no matter what. Our ability to feel okay, our ability to feel connected to ourselves, our ability to know that we are whole and complete in every single moment. And that's something that does not just fluctuate. You don't just become less valuable because somebody wants to express how they feel to you. You don't become less valuable because somebody else has an opinion.
Well, I like what you said of there's always a way out. Like there's just always a way out. I think when we get into this very cyclical thinking where we feel anxious, we feel trapped, and we think that we can't see beyond this experience, whatever it may be that's causing anxiety, whether it's conflict or working through a career thing. I think that's why taking a step back is so helpful. But I think the other thing I was thinking was in these moments where we feel the most anxious or stressed, like in a lot of ways, like there's no wrong thing that you can do if you zoom out and like you look at like your 90-year-old self. It's like there's nowhere to get. You're going to get to the place where you die at some point, and there's no competition for how you should have or should not have done something. I think it's learning to be true to yourself, and a lot of the times being true to yourself means taking accountability for your stuff too. And I think doing that is what allows you to grow even when things are challenging and difficult. I think it's very natural to want to run away from things that are scary or challenging or difficult, but those are the times where we really learn the most or the biggest changes in our life and our experience can be made. And I think in those moments, it's just really important to call out that there's no wrong way to do anything. Like someone might tell you there is a wrong way to do something, but ultimately, if you're like looking at your 90-year-old self, are they going to tell you that there's a wrong way to do something? If there's a wrong way to do something, there isn't because it's everything is a lesson. So I think I guess if there was a wrong way, it's just not learning from the experience. It's just running away from it and not seeing it for what it is. Because there's no wrong thing that you can do if you're only comparing yourself to you. Because life is all about just a continuous process of taking one step forward and allowing ourselves to see that progress. And it's really only you who can know where you've came from and how you've changed. So if you're taking that mindset of it's all about growth, it's all growth mindset, no matter what happens, I'm going to learn something from this. It's just helpful to know that I'm not stuck here because if you're growing, you're never stuck. That doesn't mean it's not uncomfortable, but you can't be stuck if you have a growth mindset. You might just be frustrated with your situation, but those two things are very different.
It's also like zooming out at an existence and reality and recognizing that we're all connected and we're all here. We're all made up of the same atoms and carbons and particles on this planet somehow here. And we are watching all of this happen. The idea of being defined by one single experience and it having so much weight on who you are instead of recognizing that life goes minute to minute, moment to moment, and we're going to go through discomfort for as long as we continue to live. And it's not about avoiding the discomfort. I just think that when we get too comfortable with being comfortable, we think we're doing ourselves a favor because that safety component of the mind comes in of keep you safe, keep you safe. I don't want you to get hurt. And sometimes it's like, hey, guy, mind, listen up. I appreciate you being there for me. I appreciate you trying to keep me safe. I appreciate you looking out for me. And maybe what you're showing me right now is something I would have needed when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe there would be a time where I was extremely scared of conflict, but I don't think that's true anymore. I think I trust myself now. I think I am secure in knowing that uncertainty is all there is in life. And trying to find certainty is what makes me feel so miserable, and creating stories and imagining things going bad instead of just zooming out and looking out the window and watching the trees blowing and realizing the mental storm of my mind was just a mental storm of my own mind, no one else's experience. So it's profoundly impactful to have separation from our thoughts. Like, re-going through this experience that I just went through, I was really so anxious. I felt like I was back in, like, college or high school of being so scared that something was wrong with a friend. And we're also talking about, like, one of my best friends here. Like, it's, like, so disproportionate, but the thing to highlight is that I could have believed the immediate reaction. I could have believed that. And the more we become aware of these thought processes, the more we realize, oh, we are growing. And sometimes the brain just firing a synapse that worked in the past, but you just don't need anymore. You're okay. You can handle this.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you frame it that way because we are we're always growing in it. One moment we might feel like we've taken 5 steps backward and then we're like, "Oh, I know what you're doing here, mind." And you recognize like jump 6 steps forward because you're like, "Right, like that was just something I fell into." Like that was just an experience that I had to experience to understand the growth that I've had with understanding a situation like this, where in the past, this would have lasted a longer period of time. In the past, this would have been a longer experience for me to go through hell. Whereas now I'm realizing, oh, this took an hour. And all the time we're going to step backwards. But as we learn and as we grow, it's like the time in which we spring back to health, spring back to like how we see things more grounded, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And it gets to a point where even when you're going through things, you might even have an awareness of it. And this is just like the classic cliche line of like growth is not linear. There's always going to be moments and hiccups where we go into fight or flight and we catch ourselves wanting to respond in ways that we have in the past. But luckily, awareness is what allows us to question it, maybe talk through it without having a lot of weight into it, and then letting it pass and subside. And I think that's a beautiful cycle. I think that's what life's all about, being able to grow and learn in those little moments. I think that's really exciting. I think that there's a sense of relief that comes from that because there's so much agony and suffering that like I know I've created for myself in my life. So when I go through experiences like this, I'm like, oh, like you don't have to suffer and go through agony for longer than what's necessary. You can remember what that experience is like for a short period of time. And right, I can separate that and I can go back to like my homeostasis of like my baseline of feeling grounded and steady and composed within myself. And like how cool is that? Like it's kind of, you think of it as like a reminder of like don't get too comfortable because anything can happen at any moment. But it's our resiliency really to be able to jump back. As we learn, we become more resilient. And I've never thought of it like that. Growth inhibits resiliency because we watch ourselves go down the same path over and over and over again. And that path just gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until it's just like a two step a two-step process, and then we come back out of it. And I just think that's a beautiful experience because it's a reminder like we can never get too comfortable, but there's always the awareness that allows us to come back and be whole in ourselves, because that's what all of this is. It's just wanting to feel whole in who we are. And I think the more we recognize that no one can take that away from us, like not a single person can, we can handle so much more things, more than we ever thought that we could. And that is the connective fabric of being with others and sharing love and sharing deep connection and supportive. More often than not, like we want to be able to support the people we love, but ourselves get in the way of that because of our emotions and our feelings and our hurt. So the more that we're able to understand those and work through them on our own, the more that we can be that supportive person for people that we love in our lives. And that's another form of connection and love. So, of course, that's going to feel good. It's going to feel like a resolution. It's going to feel like we all feel whole and connected. And like that's growth in my eyes. That's resiliency in my eyes. And again, like, yeah, I think that's what life is all about. So, when we can look at hard moments as we cannot be minimized from this, no matter how difficult or scary an experience is, we cannot be minimized because we are whole and complete no matter what.
And what a beautiful journey to be doing all this work of taking accountability and looking at ourselves and recognizing we're not our thoughts and then getting thrown into the fire, having experiences come up that challenge us, only to remember we have this whole toolkit that we can look to. Like anytime I go through something now that's difficult, is for example, I go do some yoga after, put on some music that helps me tap into my feeling state. And it's like what is really coming up in these moments when I'm scared and when I'm anxious, it's just I just need to come back to myself. I need to come back to this feeling state of maybe it's pain, maybe it's fear. Most of the time, it's sadness. Most of the time, it's like this feeling of vulnerability, of being like a little kid who's alone and who's scared and just feels scared. But there's something so beautiful about learning to come back to that with yourself and not being scared of having that experience because you realize that you can come back to you. You can always come back to you. And what a beautiful realization to have that no matter what is happening out there externally, your inner world forever will be protected by you. You only need to show as much as you need to depending on what you feel. You only need to push yourself as much as you need to feel like you're capable of pushing yourself. We can protect ourselves by recognizing that the key to your inner world, the key to the depths of your pain and the depths of your emotion, you don't have to ever make a copy of that key for anyone else if you don't want. It's you who holds the key. And it's knowing that no matter what, that key is right there waiting for you to open up the door again. And you're never back to square one, no matter how difficult these experiences are. Even if the initial experience is scary and you're feel like you're going through hell again, it's, oh, but I went through that for 15 minutes. In the past, that would have been my whole month of fear consuming me. So if there's any way to measure growth in in a journey that's not linear and in a journey that really doesn't even exist, it's the recognition that we can see how much we've changed when we see that the awareness finds its way back. The awareness of maybe the way I'm viewing this is not the truth is the most powerful thing you could have on this entire planet. It's recognizing that what you think is true is most likely not truth because there is no truth besides being here in this moment, having this conversation right now with you, Daisy, talking to you, conversing, being here. And that's the only place that we can ever come back to. So, what a beautiful reminder of our unwavering capacity to. We may fall over and over again, but we get pretty good at knowing where the first aid kit is and knowing that we can just put the band aid on and not in the way of avoid, but in the way of we know how to soothe. We know how to soothe ourselves. We know how to take care of ourselves. It's a journey of learning how to take care of yourself because ultimately we cannot change what happens out there, but we can always come back to that inner world that has the most abundant amount of love and truth.
Because at the end of the day, it's just us. We're only experiencing life through ourselves. And I firsthand know like how easy it is to want to take my problems and put them onto other people. And then it's easy to wonder why, oh, why are my relationships not great? Why do I not feel autonomous? Why do I not feel like I'm in control of my life? And it's like, oh, I guess we have to make peace with our own difficulties. We have to make peace with our own struggles. We have to make peace with our own insecurities. And no one can fix that for us, not even the closest people in our life. What makes our relationships with friends and family and loved ones so cherished is when we're able to show up as our own individuals, when we're able to show up as our own independent people And that's accountability. And I think the interesting thing about growth is that words might be defined one way in the dictionary, but they continue to take on more and more meaning as we continue to grow and gain more resiliency and more understanding, because you can only understand with what you're experiencing, with how well you're adapting to the world. And the more you're able to adapt to your own difficulties, the more accountability you can take. So it's like, of course, this definition of accountability is going to continue to change, because the more our relationship to ourself changes, the more the definition of so many words are going to change. Our whole experience is going to change. So I think that's really a huge lesson of like really truly learning how to take accountability for ourselves, because that ultimately is what allows us to live a beautiful life that's full of meaningful connections and truth, honestly. And that's not to say that it's not really difficult and it's not hard, but again, like if you look at your 90-year-old self looking back at you, it's like, what are they going to wish that you had done? It's not about the external things as much as I think it is about the internal things of how did you push yourself, and maybe, like your fight might look different than other people's fight. And like that's an intense word to use, but it's more so bridging the gap of who you've thought you've been to who you are. And that's going to be a different experience for everyone. So ultimately you have to get to know yourself. And that's the experience of life. It's getting to know yourself. So this has been a great conversation. Thanks for bringing the topic to the table. We definitely digressed and came to a spot that we always come to of resiliency and growth and accountability. And I think that's growth itself. It's learning how to work through these kinds of problems. And you look a lot more relaxed. I'm sure just talking through this for yourself is really ultimately what made a difference in how you feel. That's all we can do is talk through things for ourselves.
Yeah, what a beautiful vehicle to have to express this podcast, to be able to show up and talk through things, because oftentimes a lot of the reason why we get stuck, or really we feel stuck, is because we're not expressing to ourselves. We're not finding a medium to express what is on our mind, because when we're not expressing, we run the risk of holding on so tightly to what we're believing, instead of letting the thoughts fly out. Watch them blow out as you exhale your breath. And that's a continuous journey of life, breathing in and letting go. So, yeah, thank you all for being here. I think this was a really awesome conversation. It was very reflective for me as well. And I think just a reminder of, as we're on this journey of growing and evolving, we're going to be challenged, and not thinking that the challenge is the end of the road. There's always more. There's always another day. You will always get through it no matter what. So don't lose sight of your toolkit. Don't lose sight of all the growth that you've done. Don't lose sight of your inner knowing. No matter where you are, you can always find that key, and you can always unlock your inner world. It will be there forever as long as you're existing, and no one can ever take that away from you. So thank you for listening. I've enjoyed this conversation, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.